this may very well be the most unique GMT watch I've reviewed this year. This is the Beaufort Fiordland GMT. It's unique in the sense that it is a blend of a sector dial dress watch from the 1950s, blended in with a so-called, maybe famous, cave spelunking dual time zone telling watch. I'll let you be the judge of what watch that could be. Interestingly enough, the best and most unique feature set of the Fiordland GMT has to be that steel bezel that is fully loomed. I don't see this very often. Now that I think about it, a loomed bezel makes perfect sense for something that's a fixed steel bezel, especially on a dual time zone telling watch where you may be traveling, and chances are if you're crossing several time zones, it's bound to be dark somewhere. With that being said, having it loomed would allow you to read the time, at least the local time, rather easily. The steel fixed bezel has been brushed with a sunburst array. Combined with the fact that there's not a single polished surface on this watch, you do really get the sense that this watch is designed for everyday wear. The important thing to know is that this is a true traveler's GMT. There's a lot of fuss around this. What does that mean? It means that you can simply adjust the hour hand independently to the time zone that you want, and it's functional as you can lock the minutes in place, allowing for a quick time setting as you're jumping through different time zones. Note that this watch does not have a date complication, which gives the dial that symmetry that we all know and love out of no-date watches, but the functionality of a GMT. You can argue whichever way you want that a GMT watch should have a date. I'm of the mindset that if it doesn't take away from the design, include it. If it does actually do something adverse for the design of the watch, then give us the option of having both. The use of a Miyota 9075 lends to the watch's thinness. What do I mean by that? Usually when micro brands go to this movement, you end up with a taller hand stack, as the Miyota 9075 does have a relatively aggressively tall hand stack. That means that you'll have to go for a taller crystal, or a thicker bezel, or thicker mid case. Beaufort has managed to balance out these proportions quite nicely, lending to a 12.8mm thick case. The crown has been generously sized. I have no issues operating it, and it is also signed with the company logo. The angular case shape reminds me of old vintage dress watches. It's a very unique flair. I find that the combination of the sporty bezel mixed with the dress watch case but brushed surfaces throws the brain out of a loop as to what this watch really is. It's one thing that micro brands always seem to figure out and spend a lot of time on. It's the case finishing. In this case, I love that satinated brushed look of this watch, combined with the fact that the numerals are the correct size, the bezel indices and the placement of them are just right in my opinion. This is a watch that I think is very functional and beautiful all at the same time. 20mm lug width means that you can accommodate a variety of different straps. That bracelet also has a female end link which pivots into the watch case, allowing for a shorter lug-to-lug width, which aids in the comfort of this watch. The lug-to-lug length is only 47mm. Balanced with a 39mm case, you have a crowd pleaser in terms of proportions and case size. I mentioned that the lug width is 20mm and the buckle is around 16mm. That's a nice aggressive taper that lends to the elegance of the watch. The clasp is also a double twin trigger release with the Beaufort company logo on it. There are plenty of micro adjustments. There are about 4 of them in fact for you to dial in the fitment that you want. Unfortunately, there is no half links that I can see on this bracelet to accommodate that in-between size. A nice touch is the engine brushed. To my pleasant surprise, the inner side of the buckle, or clasp rather, has been brushed with very delicate perlage. It catches the light beautifully, and it's not an area that one would pay attention to, but Beaufort has put the time in here. Combined with a relatively simple and rather thin buckle design, or clasp design rather. I've reviewed a number of watches and this is the first time I've seen a micro brand spend that time to finish the inside of a clasp with perlage. Now, in terms of the overall solidity of the bracelet, no complaints. It uses a conventional screw link system, which means that you'll have to remove a set of screws to get at the links to adjust them. No issues with adjusting the bracelet in my opinion. I found great success in dialing in the micro adjustment after taking out just 2 links to get the fit that I needed on the wrist. and the screws were easy enough to remove. This is one of those tricky cases where I've mentioned that that nice tapered bracelet from 20mm down to 16mm is rather elegant, but would you rather have some polished surfaces to break up all this brush linearity? Let me know in the comments what you think in terms of the ideal bracelet finishing would be. The female end link does have removable pins that are the quick release spring bars that allows you to remove that female link altogether. Now it has a gentle flange at the underside for it to sit against the watch case, which means you have a very simple female end link that won't damage the case with those ears that you'll normally see on bracelets that will rest against the inner side of the lugs. Beaufort has kept the finishing of the movement, the Miyota 9075, to a very minimal level. You get a small little company logo on the rotor, and that's pretty much it. Everything else is standard fare here. The appreciation of a exhibition case back allows you to see the inner workings of the movement. Could I do without it? Possibly, to have a thinner case, but really it's not a big complaint, if I must say so. The fact is that they used a really nice movement that's already quite beautiful to look at is a plus. Would love to see a micro brand do a Miyota 9075 with their own flair and increase the power reserve from 42 to maybe 50 or 70 hours, something of a wish list. We have to talk about the standout feature of this watch, in my opinion, and I think one of the most unique features, which under that boxed domed sapphire crystal, with anti-reflective coating that is, you get this wonderful dial that you can have either in a copper orange or a martini gray color, a light green I believe, and also a limited edition red color exclusively for Red Bar. I have to say I was very impressed with the quality of the dial. Take a look for yourself. There really is no flaws that I can detect with the printing. The hands are extremely sharp and they're well done and no tool marks. They seem to have paid careful attention to the inner. This layered appearance of the dial reminds me of an amphitheater of detail. So just imagine the outer extremities of the dial has this engine-turned chapter ring met with an inner scale for timekeeping that you can use for the seconds and the minutes, and at the center, this type of sector or segmented dial with fine textures to break out the differences and draw attention to the dial. Beaufort has opted for Super Luminova C1 for the lume, and I think it's a great use of it. Now, having the watch loomed up, I then start to wish that the hands were a little bit bolder, maybe even just a hair bit larger to accommodate that bold design of the fixed bezel. Just a mark of improvement in my opinion. It's an eye-catching look, definitely on the wrist. Now, on my 6.4-inch wrist, the watch sits comfortably. As you can tell, there is really no overhang or no gaps between the case to my wrist. It sits relatively flat, and that's partly in thanks to the female end links and the shorter lug design. Combined with the fact that you can actually get this watch on a NATO strap, and that 12.8mm thin case would accommodate for the NATO strap no problem at all. I found that combining it with this Havaston Grey NATO is a perfect combination. This color combination of a darker gray dial met with that fixed steel bezel is the perfect combination for everyday wear. It'll work with most of your attire and suit most situations just fine. The most difficult choice you have to make is picking the color that fits you right. Now, in terms of the affordability factor, the watch retails at 797 Canadian dollars on the rubber strap. I think that getting this watch on a bracelet is a must, and that is an additional $100 on top. So all in all, it is just right under that range of micro-brand watches that feature the Miyota 9075, that range that I come to expect. Great case finishing, great choice in movement, unique design that I've not ever seen before in the micro-brand world, and overall, a really compelling package. Thank you for watching. I will catch you in the next one.